And then he had me change how I grip my racket, just to see if maybe how the ball was hitting off the face of the racket, if there was something that was just the vibration was irritating. So once I did that, it was like an audible pop in my hand, and it just immediately felt like my hand was being burnt off. Almost a year after the initial injury, at that point, I kind of resigned to myself, okay, this probably is going to derail my plans a lot more in a permanent fashion than I was expecting. That's sort of the deceiving portion of things. So I kind of straddle the line of invisible illness and then a chronic illness that's visible. So about 75% of the year, I look totally normal. I can walk around, nobody would know. The other 25%, I'm either using a cane or parts of my limbs are swollen or bruised, significantly pain because of what has happened. So I'm constantly in pain. I don't remember really a time where my left side of my body wasn't in pain, or I say it's sort of like a constant level of bruise or broken bone feeling on the left side. Important for me was when I wanted to build Invisiyouth, was I made sure that it framed the way I viewed my illness, which was slightly sarcastic optimism in a way. So there is sort of that darker humor tone. We are very realist, but we're not like rainbows and sunshine either. We kind of just, for me, it was partly humor, I think, is partly a coping skill for so many people.
Yep.
But I also think it lets you kind of mentally and emotionally kind of unpack situations in a way that makes the people around you feel comfortable to ask questions or dig in a bit more, because I wanted to make sure that we kind of stayed on our lane of what we like to do. And then based on where you're at in your journey, you can either totally disagree with all of our different resources and advice. We always promote that nothing is a one size fits all. We always say if any charity sort of promoting their teachings and wanting you to fit their framework, you have to be able to fit their way of living with illness or disability. So
let's go to the next segment. I know it's one of your favorite segments. Let's break the glass ceiling. So, do you think advocacy is just a way for someone to feel important? And do you think it's worth doing? Cue the music. So that one time.
Oh boy.
So here's where Dominique will tell us his story, so I don't have to talk for the next 5 minutes or so. So take it away, Dominique.
Oh my gosh. Oh God, I have to think of a story.
So the last segment we're going to talk about is the path to power segment, some music.
Yay.
What gets you up in the morning? What motivates you?
So that's sort of the utopian goal. The realistic one for the charity is that I really would love for our resources to be more visible to more young people in other universities and schools, so that when you're dealing with health issues, we're an option that you can just kind of go shopping in what we're doing. And
okay. Hello, welcome to my podcast, to Mike One Joe Seuss. I'm Joe Seuss. I'll be giving you my to Dominique. Dominique is the founder and executive director of Invisiyouth. It's a nonprofit organization that helps teens and young adults around the world with various chronic illnesses and disability gain the right lifestyle programs, empowerment tools, and fun resources to keep living life with any health struggles. She also has her own podcast called Invisiyouth, so that's awesome. So I find a podcast host episode reflection of what people wish they would be asked. I'm going to spin this around and I'm going to ask you all the questions you ask your guests. Are you ready?
Oh boy. I'm so ready after 5 seasons.
All right, I have here you were doing off-season training in tennis when you developed a neurovascular condition and subsequent connective tissue disorder. You have nerve damage on your left side, so you had to make your right side dominant. My question is, when was the last time you felt normal?
Oh man. Honestly, probably even before my chronic illnesses, that was never really a term I described myself with. I think the chronic illnesses kind of made that more of an obvious choice to everyone else, but I always was a bit more, my parents would describe me more as an old soul. I would always go hang out with my friends, but then I would kind of meander off and go hang out with their parents at times and just chat with them about their days and their work. So I always beat to my own drum a little bit in general. And then I think the health issues kind of exacerbated my uniqueness a bit at times.
My God, it almost sounds insulting when you call an old soul at the age of 15.
Yeah. I was single digits when that was thrown at me as well.
So, like, you don't talk about yourself a lot online. Was it a little
Mm.
surprising considering you are very open helping other people? And I feel like we should open you up a little more. So, like, was the injury when you developed your disorder, was it because of the tennis, or was it
Mhm.
more like a bad luck of you developing a disorder just based on bad genes or something like that?
So a bit of both. So my tennis injury caused my initial chronic illness that I have, but because I have a genetic condition that was underlying, that was dormant at that point, it
Okay.
slowly exacerbated something that, from what my doctors tell me, I probably would have noticed and gotten developed and diagnosed in my 30s, maybe. It just sort of happened all at the same time. So at this point, they just kind of feed off of one another.
Like, what went wrong that you're like, oh shit, something's wrong with you?
Well, yeah, it was when I was playing competitively. I played from 8 to 15, 16 years old. So, as competitive as you can play as a child, I kind of wanted the little bit of a type A personality in me, wanted to play the tournaments and join all the teams. And I had different coaches for all different conditioning just to play tennis. I wanted to get scouted for a university. And so it was training for 4 to 6 hours a day, more than 5 days a week, and waking up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. to drive to practices.
You're really
So
dedicated.
yeah, it was a primary identifier for me, was playing tennis. And so you play through injuries, and a lot of teenage athletes know that. You're kind of it's really encouraged to do as much as you can to work through the injury and then get back to playing.
Hmm.
So I was comfortable with that mindset, and being 15 years old, I didn't think an injury was going to detrimentally
Of
change
course,
my
yeah.
life. I just went, okay. And so I had had hand injuries in my left side before, a few months before the actual injury. And then when I was playing one day with one of my coaches, it just felt like burning through my left hand every time I would hit ground strokes with him. And so he just said, I told him about it. And so we kind of switched sides. He had me trying to do other shots. And then he had me change how I grip my racket, just to see if maybe how the ball was hitting off the face of the racket, if there was something that was just the vibration was irritating. So
Hmm.
once I did that, it was like an audible pop in my hand, and it just immediately felt like my hand was being burnt off.
My God.
And so it was twitching and immediately starting to get swollen. And so I couldn't play any longer. And so we left that day, and that was the last time I ever played.
My God.
So at that point, yeah, from that point forward, it went within a week after that injury. My hand was 3 times the size. It was navy blue. I couldn't move my fingers. So at that point, that's when the doctor started to believe, okay, it's not tendonitis. You didn't break anything. Something else that's probably a little more atypical has to be happening here, because they couldn't get a pattern.
What do you remember what mindset you were in? Like, were you in the mindset of like, oh, this will just pass and now they go back to playing, or did you think that it was just over for everything?
In the beginning, it was definitely, I had the kind of competitive athlete mindset of, okay, you're going to go to physio, you'll 6, 8 weeks, you'll then slowly work into your training. I'll be
Hmm.
back. This was in right around New Year's. I'll be back by summer at the latest.
Hmm.
But slowly kind of seeing the physical therapy not working, them adding more PT, and then more and more doctors becoming more and more unsure about what they were trying to diagnose, as they were then sending me to more specialists, and everybody had a different colleague that specialized in something else who was going to test me in something else. And so very quickly in the beginning, I just kind of did the revolving door of doctors, of nobody could diagnose it or treat it. So they just kept sending me to more and more people to try and diagnose it and treat it. So once it left my hand and started spreading elsewhere into my lower extremities and went into my leg almost a year after the initial injury, at that point, I kind of resided to myself, okay, this probably is going to derail my plans a lot more in a permanent fashion than I was expecting.
So let's talk about when you were actually diagnosed. So how long did it take for you to actually get diagnosed with something?
That took probably close to 2 years. The one of my diagnoses was thrown around as an option. I wasn't responding to treatments in the typical fashion or the medical textbook fashion, so it was always an option, but. And so there always was this, you have this, but there's something else. And so it was always trying to figure out if they were correct with option A or if it was just a two-parter. And so it wasn't really until I got to an actual specialist in my initial injury that he was like, yes, this is correct. And then I was able to finally have physical therapy tailored into the form it should have been. I also added integrative medicine into it. So I do acupuncture. That started when I was 18. And so kind of blending both styles of treatment to do more symptom management was what allowed my body to see progress that my doctors are probably hoping for to happen.
So you're saying a combination of the, I guess, Western medicine and other drugs has helped you. Once you got diagnosed, it helped you because obviously you're not swollen now and you look normal now?
Yeah, so that's sort of the deceiving portion of things. So I kind of straddle the line of invisible illness and then a chronic illness that's visible. So about 75% of the year, I look totally normal. I can walk around, nobody would know. The other 25%, I'm either using a cane or parts of my limbs are swollen or bruised significantly. My vascular system, it'll rupture, so it'll turn like bright blues and purples and sort of spread. So, or I'll have more neurological issues where I'll start to stutter or things like that. So, but that's a smaller portion. So most of the time it's just me dealing with my illness and nobody else really knowing.
So it seems is there like any trigger that you have found, or is it a random occurrence?
So if I'm dealing with a flare-up in general, so if I'm overusing my limbs or if I'm overworking, which as you know, running a business or being your own boss, like we were talking about, sort of practicing that self-care and balance of time management is not always a skill that I will always preach it constantly through the charity. It's not something I can constantly practice 100%.
Of course.
So those times when I don't.
True boss.
Yeah. When I'm not capable of that, I do know my body will just start to fatigue. And because of that, it'll just set off different portions of my health. And then minor injuries to other people, if it's on my left side, will become major injuries. So around my birthday, I bumped into a doorknob that was sticking out, and within 2 minutes, it was bright red, and the next day, my arm was swollen and 3 times the size, and we just kind of knew, okay. So it's just, it depends. Usually it's, yeah, basically. Yeah, the door. My poor brother-in-law saw it and went, oh, it's just a bump, and we all went, it's not just a bump, and so the rest of us knew.
Like when you mentioned like the bump, so is it like all bumps, or they kind of like you really have no idea? Like you can bump 20 times and one of it might flare, but the rest will just be like, okay, it's just a bump.
Yeah, I can at this point, because I've had health issues for it's almost 14 years now. So for me, I can kind of tell if I'm feeling what's my version of baseline. I can kind of manage with some bumps or here or there, because I can kind of quickly jump in and try and kind of symptom manage it very quickly. But if I'm dealing with other health issues on the same tone of it, then I kind of know my body's not going to be capable to bounce back from it. So
what do you do? Like you say, like 75% of the time you're fine. So like, what do you do in the 75%? Like, do you do anything? And then what do you do in the 25% when you are in flare mode?
So I'm part of my health issues is with chronic pain because of what has happened. So I'm constantly in pain. I don't remember really a time where my left side of my body wasn't in pain, or I say it's sort of like a constant level of bruise or broken bone feeling on the left side. So that's just always there. That's just for me to kind of deal with, nobody else, obviously. But so on those days, that's why acupuncture has been a big tool for me to kind of symptom manage every month. Even if I'm feeling okay, we call it kind of the fine tune up. So I'll kind of go in every month, talk about all different symptoms or issues I've been having, and we just sort of tailor the treatment towards that, to kind of just keep me trucking along at my version of normal until there's actual more visibly apparent issues.
And then what do you do in the 25% where you are in flare mode and you need relief?
Yeah, it's such a tricky question.
Yeah.
With a lot of people who have different rare diseases as well, unfortunately, there's not tons of research on all types of diseases and illnesses. So you are kind of, as some of my doctors have described it, where they're only capable of just putting out the fires when they happen, not really getting to what's actually causing them. So if
what
I'm dealing
helped
with
you? Like, I know everybody had individual helping, so what helps you out?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if it's more cardiac wise, I can kind of go into more the treatments that my cardiologists have kind of helped me with different medications or body positioning if I'm working, versus then if I'm having more GI issues, then I'm able to kind of tailor how I'm eating or what I'm eating to kind of help with that. When it comes to the neurovascular side of things, it's more, I have cool cap compression helmets and portable heating pads and all different things that all just depending on what is happening, I'll kind of pull out of my box of medical tricks and use those just to kind of help soothe the spikes of what's going on during the day.
Let me guess, you also go shopping too?
Yeah.
Like you add things to your cart and then you won't buy it too, right?
Yeah. A lot of definitely just I had through Invisiyouth, a lot of our teenage volunteers would mention they've gotten into watching international television shows. So that was sort of because they would tell me, I have to focus on reading subtitles and understanding. So in a way they can kind of put their focus elsewhere. So that was something that I had because I had taken Spanish in university. So I leaned towards watching telenovelas because I watched them anyway. And then I kind of let them loop me into that. So that's less of the window shopping and probably a little more of the international K-dramas and telenovelas will kind of pop in a bit more.
That's actually
often.
really smart though.
I have to say most of what I've learned that has been beneficial has been through all of these young people through Invisiyouth. They've just, through each other and just them being so much more vocal and sharing what they do that might not be textbook medical advice. It's just sort of their non-medical support that's been what I was excited about us doing, but then also for them that it's been exciting to see that that's what they are happy to talk about so much, is just sort of less of the stereotypical treatment stuff and more, okay, these are all of the other things that have helped me or I've heard have helped other people, and let me share them, or I'll just show you what I'm doing during my day and you can kind of shop around ideas from other people and just kind of see what everyone's doing or how they approach different things.
Yeah, I mean, with the chronic ill community, like I feel like some do love to talk about like the problems and stuff, and I feel like it doesn't even help. I think it helps a little bit, but at the same time, I feel like you keep jumping in more into the pool of misery, that you need something that's totally different. So like, when I talk to friends, like I don't want to talk about chronic ill stuff. I want to talk about, sports or shows or really anything else, because I think the biggest thing is just having a distraction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was a big thing when I was initially diagnosed and then going through my late teens and my 20s, going through university with health issues is I never met anyone or spoke to anyone who had a chronic illness or disability until I launched Invisiyouth. So I was always kind of the token chronically ill friend in the room that nobody really knew how to handle the larger problems I was dealing with. So for me, it was very important through the charities. I just wanted somewhere I could get advice on the non-medical parts of my life that were starting to be impacted by having health issues. And anytime I'd bring it up to doctors, the big focus was, well, we just want to fix you. We want to cure it and fix you. We'll deal with everything else later. And obviously I'm still chronically ill, so I would have been waiting quite a while if I took that sort of lane of advice. So that was important for me, was when I wanted to build Invisiyouth, was I made sure that it framed the way I viewed my illness, which was slightly sarcastic optimism in a way. So there is sort of that darker humor tone. We are very realist, but we're not like rainbows and sunshine either. We kind of just hit in a way that you can take what we are showcasing as different ways you can approach situations or advice, and then kind of shop in it and take portions of it for yourself, and some not based on how it's going to work for your illness or disability. So not really framing an illness charity around illness has made Invisiyouth a bit more unique, I guess, than other nonprofits, because we're just talking about your life as a whole, and this is just the lens that you're viewing and going through it with it.
You should change your motto to "Let's suffer together" or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's been a lot when we were coming up with our different taglines. That was definitely, I was debating how much we could lean into my dark humor or not. And then when we became international, we do have a large UK base that utilize our resources. So they jumped on our blunt humor very quickly, luckily. So I tailor my podcast episodes with our British guests to suit my humor a bit more than others.
Yeah, I love dark humor, so this is perfect.
Yes, no, definitely. That's just, for me, it was partly, humor, I think, is partly a coping skill for so many people.
Yep.
But I also think it lets you kind of mentally and emotionally kind of unpack situations in a way that makes the people around you feel comfortable to ask questions or dig in a bit more, because they can lean in on humor to actually ask the questions they want without feeling like they're overstepping.
Yeah, I find humor, like when you're in a chronic ill mindset, especially for a long time, you're like in a mindset of like, that's really hard to snap out of. So like when you're put comedy in it, that's what I try to do. You like snap out of it, and it kind of like helps you. Like the problem will still remain the same, but if you're just in a different mindset, sometimes you can like think of a solution, or kind of maybe even get better too. That's why I always just thought of just as I go along with my journey. Get like, so like I made a video like how to get over panic attacks, and the first thing is cocaine, right? And it's like, I mean, I'm sure one person gonna think me seriously, but I think it's just like you're going into the video thinking like, hey, I want to help get chronic, I want to help get over my panic attacks, but it's like I take cocaine, so I think, I know deep inside it's not really, but like if you're watching it, it like snaps you out of it, and I think that will help more. Maybe like yes, the video will help, but I think it's also that it changes your mindset that you just feel better after the video. Even though if you won't follow any of my advice, just like watching me entertain you, I think will just help in the long run too. Get kind of the other thing is like, so like if you talk about like suicide, for example, and like you want to commit suicide, and like what's the hotline, like so when you're in a suicide state, you're in a mind state of really bad stuff, but it's very short. So like you Googling it, like this hotline number, and like going to the number, that's enough time for you to like snap out of it too. And it's all about the mindset, and it's all about, it's really all about the mindset. Just deep down, like think I'm goofy and like humor and stuff, which is my personality, but also I think it's just snap out of the mindset. I think that's really important of dealing with any chronic ill community, because it's really fucking hard to be in the community.
Yeah.
So we don't have like we don't have like a treatment that will work 100% of the time. You know, we're gonna have good days, we're gonna have bad days. It's pretty shit, and like there's no nothing a person can tell us that can make us feel better in any capacity, which really sucks too.
Oh, yeah. And I think because of with my own health issues and then kind of getting to work through Invisiyouth and having such a large network of young people kind of in that larger 13 to 35 kind of age group, they've really, it's so much of the focus because of you being at doctors is about you and your health and how you feel. But there's so many people around you that start to be impacted by the way in which you are going about it. So it's important, like you said, to find ways that can bring ease to yourself, but then also allow them to ask more conversations and have questions about things that they might want to ask but feel a lot of times they don't have the right to bring up because they're not dealing with health issues, so they don't know how to address different things to you. So the way, and I will always say, is a lot of times health issues can feel like a lot of your independence and choice is taken, and if you logically, a lot of times it is. But at the same token, you then, with the people around you, you have a lot more independence in choosing the way that those people can interact with you, how they ask questions, because you can really lay down the groundwork of this is how I want to communicate with someone, this is how I want to talk about my health with you or have you involved. So you can really take that ownership back in a different capacity of life because you're dealing with a different sort of health struggle or with your disability.
Yeah, I think it's all about just having them relax a little bit too and just being okay, like just going to a doctor is stressful as fuck. Just being strong for yourself is stressful as fuck. That takes a lot of hard work and energy, and you have a script going on in your head and obviously would never follow the script, and it's like it's really difficult. So I try to like help it in a comedy way, and also try to be realistic. I think like the chronic ill community is too positive, and I think actually as a whole I think it's incredibly toxic.
Yeah, there's a level of, I think it's in waves for people. I always will say a lot of times Invisiyouth's been around for over 7 years now, and our tone has always remained the same, but the young people that have come in and out of the charity have always evolved with the charity or differently based on what they're dealing with their health. Kind of sometimes will shift the lens that they're viewing the way that they'll interact with people or what they'll share. So that's always been, I wanted to make sure that we kind of stayed on our lane of what we like to do. And then based on where you're at in your journey, you can either totally disagree with all of our different resources and advice. We always promote that nothing is a one size fits all. We always say if any charity sort of promoting their teachings and wanting you to fit their framework, you have to be able to fit their way of living with illness or disability. So for me, that never really worked because I was dealing with different illnesses and I wanted to make sure I was still trying to do different things and not let it be the main identifier for me. So coming into building Invisiyouth, that was a big thing for me, was I want to make sure that we're not really focused on the illness, that we're more on the non-medical side of it, and that young people can kind of look at our resource and say, would this work for my way of living with illness or what my diagnosis is or not? And even if you disagree, you've just kind of gotten another step closer of figuring out what works for you because you've now just taken out another option that you realized wouldn't. So even when you disagree, I always will remind younger people who want to kind of disagree very quickly on social media is even if you disagree, you've now just gotten a step closer to figuring out what works for you. So you don't have to tell somebody they're wrong. You've just realized it's wrong for you. And now you can kind of take another movement towards your direction of what will work best for you.
Yeah, that's what made chronic ill community so difficult because there's so many ways to cope and all that stuff. And like it's great that there's space for all of us to have different ways of coping of how to do this. Like I have my way of doing cocaine, you have your ways of doing acupuncture. It's just totally different ways. It's cool, and I don't know, I think the main thing is just to be authentic to what helped you, and hopefully you're not alone in that, and maybe you'll help somebody else too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I always say it's super mindful of just making sure that the internet can give lots of advice. We'll always say WebMD is like we'll always go, oh God, no, you went on Google. What we'll always hear in the beginning when people are trying to self-diagnose or figure out what's going on. And so we'll always say is that you really have to kind of take what you're learning virtually and from other people of what might work for them. And you really then have to think about your health, your way of living, your value system and structure, and then your medical team, because they're the ones who know that portion of your life best. So that's always the sort of thing we'll say is make sure you're taking everything with a grain of salt and get excited about different ideas, but then make sure you're applying them in a way that you're talking with other people and really doing the other work of figuring out how things can work for you or what might not work. Because even presenting something to a doctor of, oh, I learned somebody's doing this treatment option or they tried this, could it work for me? Even if a doctor would tell you no, they could then tell you why, and that can even get you closer to them thinking even more from a curious standpoint of going, oh, well, that reminds me of something I might have learned back in med school or I learned from a colleague, and you're kind of now sparking their options a bit more, even when you present things to them that they'll tell you wouldn't work for your diagnosis or the way that you are living with it.
So let's go to the next segment. I know it's one of your favorite segments. Let's break the glass ceiling. So, do you think advocacy is just a way for someone to feel important, and do you think it's worth doing?
Oh, I think it's worth doing both personally and publicly. I think self-advocacy is something that I'm really thankful for myself because my mom is a nurse. She's been a nurse for over 40 years. So for me, that was something very ingrained in my sister and I before my health issues of, you're the one when we're going to a pediatrician, even though I'm in there with you, I want you to answer the questions from a doctor and you talk about what's going on, so that we really were advocating for our own needs and asking those questions, so that for me, I felt a lot more prepared than I've realized other young people might feel when they then are dealing with a diagnosis or an injury or a disability, because that's not the structure, especially dealing in that pediatric transition into adult healthcare. Self-advocacy isn't really defined to you. It's just the age cutoff, and all of a sudden you're solely advocating for yourself once you go transition out of pediatric. So for me, I always put a lot more of an emphasis on learning how to do self-advocacy, and especially in your own healthcare, of learning how you like to communicate, what your voice is, and that advocacy doesn't have to look like the very typical, the stereotype of I'm going to be doing all the things and using my voice and going to all of the demonstrations. And it doesn't have to be loud. Advocacy can be quiet. It can be supporting causes online, other foundations. It can be petition work in your own social network. So I think it's beneficial learning advocacy and learning the way it works in your communication style versus being told that advocates have to be very loud public figures, and that if you wanted to advocate, you have to do it the same way.
I'll respectfully disagree, and I'm just here for the clout, honestly, and the attention, and just, to me, just really having fun with it. Like, I don't think advocacy really does much in terms of anything. Like, if people know my disease, that's great, but it's never gonna be like gonna help you in any way. It's not like we're gonna be on an airplane and someone like, do we know a doctor? And you'll be like, oh, I know this rare disease that does this and this, and like it doesn't help. It's like, I don't think it matters too much in a way. And and then there's also like we'll talk about like the inspiration porn too. Like a lot of chronic ill people be like, oh, I'm not inspirational porn, but then it's like they post inspirational stuff, and it's like, okay, like you're kind of being a hypocrite of that too. Like, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we're gonna just do regular things. Like, we don't have to keep expressing ourselves too. So like, I'm pretty quiet. Like, I could complain so much every single day, but it's toxic to complain about. It's like, you don't have to like complain about it. Like, yes, you have your condition, but like, you don't have to talk about it. Like, it's not, I don't think it really helps that much. And then also, if you're following a lot. Like my job is to follow and interview people, and I get that to an extent, but sometimes I get overwhelmed with Instagram because it'd be like all the bad things are happening to people, and it's too much for me, and I just can't handle it. Like it is.
And I think it's knowing what you enjoy, what works well for you, the way you want to approach different situations in your health. We have a lot of volunteers that are private Instagram accounts, wouldn't even notice, and will tell us flat out they never want to do anything publicly with us because they don't want to make that their focus, is their illness, or they aren't sharing it. So fitting that framework of, we have some that are on Capitol Hill, this is they've made the phrase of pain to purpose, like they've really pushed that into the pavement. So it's really, like you said, it's just finding what works for you and what you enjoy in terms of what you like to share or don't share, and where you kind of fall on that spectrum, and then just staying there. I think even like you had mentioned with the inspiration topic comes up quite a bit. I didn't really know it was I knew it kind of annoyed me at times when I heard it, but I didn't realize it was such a huge topic of conversation until it developed with Invisiyouth, and hearing it more often from more of an organization standpoint of not wanting to fall into that hole. But I know from my perspective at least, and from what we do, a lot of what we'll say when people are posting is sometimes it'll come off, what your intention of what you're sharing sometimes isn't the reaction you're going to get. And I think it's letting young people be aware. And if that then is also the second question, is, are you comfortable with, if you're going to share different portions, that you might not be getting the reaction you want, and is that okay? Because you might be sharing a portion of your day, and then an entire public will be telling you how inspirational it is that you just went to work. But that's not the reason you posted it, but just knowing, are you comfortable with getting a reaction that isn't the aim you were going for as well, and kind of thinking of your personal choices and then kind of how it's reflected elsewhere to others, because you can't control how people are going to react. And as you know, with social media, it's definitely been a unique learning experience with seeing how prominent that is in
I feel if
the
you're
work
gonna,
that you'll do.
I feel if you're gonna post, you want a reaction of some kind, because that's kind of one of the reasons why you are posting. You don't just post because to make you feel good. You want something to come back to you, because you could not post anything and just go on with your day.
Oh yeah. And some people will have some young people who go, I solely post for me, comments are off, I don't hide all my likes, I solely just want a place where all of my stuff is and I can look at it, and it's solely a them thing. And I'm like, go for it. If it's for you 100%, that's the lane, like you said, that you're picking to kind of how you want to be public or private about things.
I embrace everything. I feel like if you're going on the internet, you have to embrace the good with the bad. So I got my good share of good comments and bad comments too. I don't know. The bad comment kind of gave me fuel to my fire. So I don't know. It makes me feel good for some reason. It makes me feel like I'm doing something right too. But that's for another day.
Oh yeah, reactions. Some like you said, a lot of people, it is their fuel. They're like, oh, I love it. Now I know how to tailor something else. Or some people really look at it as constructive criticism or thinking of other perspectives they haven't thought of before. So however people want to approach the comment section, I always say you do that as it is beneficial for you.
So would you like to tell the audience what is your favorite segment you like to do on your podcast?
Oh man, sort of twofold. The one that I like to listen to the most is our intermission segment, Sooo That One Time. And that's when our guests tell us a story, because our shows are an hour long as well. So we have kind of a fun story time segment, and our guests prepare that all on their own. I've had no production prep work in that. So it's fun as a listener that I get to kind of take the back seat at times in the show and let them surprise me with what is a life story that's the most impactful.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to do with Dominique. So did
I pick the good segment?
Yeah, so cue the music. So that one time.
Oh boy.
So here's where Dominique will tell us his story, so I don't have to talk for the next 5 minutes or so. So take it away, Dominique.
Oh my gosh. Oh God, I have to think of a story. One that always comes to mind that is slightly funny is when I was in university with my health issues. Is I'm very private about sort of the ins and outs of my illnesses and what I go through. That was always how it has been prior to the charity as well. And so I have my hip muscles will snap back and forth from the connective tissue portion of things. So sometimes it'll look like my hips are dislocated and then they'll pop back in place, but it's my muscles kind of popping over the hip bone. So I was walking and I had been had been working out. So I had stretch like yoga pants on back then when yoga pants were like sort of bell bottom looking. They weren't straight legged as they are now. Mm-hmm. And the entire lacrosse team from my university was walking with their coaches and their trainers across the campus while I was. And so very audibly, it makes a noise as well. My hip sort of shifted and popped. And I have to be near a flat surface to pop it back in place. So I very quickly looked, and the only kind of flat surface was one of in America, we have the blue light system at universities. If you feel unsafe or need an escort, you go to them and hit it. And so that was the only hard physical object available. So, and it was right in front of them. So I had to kind of hop over very quickly and push my hip onto it, pop the muscle back over, and it again made a noise. So the trainers kind of ran over and were very alarmed that something had happened. And I just kind of quickly brushed it off and then shuffled my way past like 35 lacrosse players. And the next day I went to one of my classes and 4 of the guys from the team were there. And I had sat in the row behind them and they all turned around and just went, "Oh my, what happened to you yesterday? We all were talking about it when you ran away. Like, what's wrong?" So then I had to explain it to them a bit. So it was funny because they had never really approached seeing me come into class late or having different accommodations that I had for my health before. They were just sort of just chill about it and kept their head down. But when they saw it, they now knew that they could approach the subject. So I kind of gave them the cliff notes of what that was about. And so they were laughing. And then through the rest of the class, they would be a lot nicer. If they could see I was like in pain on certain days, they would like help get my stuff for me or pull my chair out for me. So it was nice seeing that probably one of the more embarrassing moments for me ended up being something beneficial in the long run. But it was, definitely a memorable college moment for sure. Was popping my muscles out of place in front of a large group of athletes.
Oh, it worked out well. That's so great.
It did.
So the last segment we're going to talk about is the Path to Power segment, some music.
Yay.
What gets you up in the morning? What motivates you? What kept you going when you were in a deep transit of dealing with your disability?
Oh, man. Well, the one I would have to say is my family. I'm full Italian, so I have a very close-knit parents and my sister. And so they took a very intentional role of when they could physically just see I was just not wanting to deal with this another day. And I knew it was going to be a bad day health-wise. They were the ones that really took my hand and kind of pulled me through and tried to make me laugh or do things that would try to brighten portions of my day for me and then remind me that I was capable when I didn't feel very capable. And the irony is that having Invisiyouth really has been something that's motivating because it's working with so many other young people who have health issues. But then at the same token, to have incorporated other things in my life that aren't work-related or health-related. I love cooking, so I know if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to be the one I'm cooking dinner, I'll be baking or doing things that for me are important to kind of have little micro activities of things that are joyful or fun for me that are completely outside of my illness that I can always remind myself, okay, you can do those. That'll make you smile. Like, just let's do something else and pause what's becoming melancholy at the moment, because it'll still be there. Just let's give yourself a bit of a break and a laugh and then you can come back to being melancholy in 5 minutes. But let's just give yourself a bit of a break. It's knowing that you don't have to change your mood and try to make it sustain itself changed. I think a lot of times that's the perspective, is if it's a bad day, that I have to try to change it and then I'm happy then from moving forward, where sometimes that's not going to be realistic, and putting those little pockets of happy, joyful little things in the middle are what are more impactful moving forward, because you can't just always 180 flip the way your body's reacting or your health, as well as just how you're mentally going to be handling it that day.
The last question I'm going to ask you is, what goal do you want to accomplish with your charity, and what goal do you have for yourself?
I always will say it with Invisiyouth, the 2-part goal is my sort of utopian goal is that I end up being unemployed. I would just love for what we do to be so unnecessary, because it's just naturally being discussed in families or with doctors, that there is more accurate representation of young people, that they don't have to explain just their way of being with others, that we would become obsolete and I would have to get another job. So that's sort of the utopian goal. The realistic one for the charity is that I really would love for our resources to be more visible to more young people in other universities and schools, so that when you're dealing with health issues, we're an option that you can just kind of go shopping in what we're doing and figure out what might work for you to help in your day to day. So being able to have more partnerships with non-illness or disabled based organizations. So being able to kind of mirror that bridge would be really nice for the charity. It's something that we've really strived to try to do. And then for myself personally, I always will just say a lot more serenity. Having health issues can make things go up and down all the time. And then being in charge of your own organization and your work puts a lot of pressure at times on yourself. So to have more serenity through the day, that it's just, there's a more calmness that I'm able to go back to, instead of that kind of go or push through mindset, that I can ease a bit, I would hope. Now I'm 30, so I'm hoping my 30s will bring in more serenity than my teens and 20s did. One last question
I want to ask you. So you started playing tennis. Have you ever picked up a racket and tried to play again, just for casual?
So the vibration of the racket is something that, from a pain perspective, with my one injury, does trigger it. So not super wise on that end, but also a big portion of why I loved the sport was the competitive nature. And I always knew for me to play recreationally would be challenging, because I loved that portion of the sport. So for me, I've learned... Yeah, my one tennis coach, he called me the Dominator. That was his nickname for me. That was something I realized quickly. As much as I would probably be able to go back in a casual way, I am ambidextrous, so I probably could learn to play right-handed and just avoid this arm. For me, I realized that watching other people play competitively kind of fuels that fire that I could have playing it myself, because I would just want to play at a level that my health would not be wise. So we've let that portion of the sport go.
I'm sure you look at other players and be like, I was better than that.
No, I was so hard on myself when I played. I would watch myself now going, wow, the amount of extra hours I would put in for like a 1/4 inch of a racket tilt and constant serve practices, which you do often with a sport. But wow, I was very, very hard on myself at like 15, 16, trying to just be better and better and better. So yeah, a lot of young people now, I just go, wow, I remember the hours, and I know you're putting in 2 or 3 times the amount of hours that I put in. So yeah, I enjoy it now, knowing the amount of physical labor that they put into the sport, as somebody who can be empathetic to their journey.
Before I take the mic away from you, is there anything you want to say, promote any words of wisdom, the winning lottery numbers? The mic is all yours.
Well, winning lottery numbers would have been great. But yeah, I mean, just mainly if anyone wanted to find our nonprofit organization and what we do, we're at Invisiyouth all over social media and YouTube, and our podcast show is Invisiyouth Chat Sessions. So we're on YouTube for that and all audio podcast platforms. And I'm over there as well. My Instagram's now at Dominique Vale 22, which is brand new. I just got that a couple months ago, so that's a new experience. But yeah, so you could always find me or find Invisiyouth, and hopefully you enjoy the resources and programs that we put out. And thank you so much for having me. It was really wonderful getting to chat with you.
Yeah, so thank you, Dominique, so much for giving me your time and expertise. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. All the links for Dominique will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch everyone next time. Bye.